6 pints, bro, by the way, and no dinner.
Have you actually?
Yeah,
I couldn't tell to be fair.
that's right.
That'll be funny as fuck, mate. This is gonna be an interesting episode then.
That's gonna be good. I'm
Oh,
soaked as
it'll be
well because I
alright.
rode my
Maybe
moped
on
back.
me.
Rode my moped back in the rain, bro. Fucking steaming.
Oh, there was rain in there.
Skirt, skirt.
Can't see. It's fucking
Bro, I
crap.
couldn't fucking sing. I was fucking steaming.
What's Barley done to you, man?
I'm fucking sick at driving a moped now.
Yes, guys, welcome back to another week of the Weekly Roundup. I'm joined by Will, who's obviously in Bali, and we've got some big news for you again. Obviously, this week there's always news in crypto, but I feel that this week it's not been many stories, but like the stories that we're going to bring to you today, guys, are big and they're significant, and we're kicking it off with this: UK have another new prime minister. It is what it is. It's a bit of a laughing stock at the moment here in the UK, but I think this appointment is very bullish, and we're going to explain why it's bullish. What do you think about it, Will?
Well,
What's your
first
first
of
impressions
all,
of it?
episode 29, madness.
Yeah.
It's madness that we're here on episode 29. And then to get into the Prime Minister story, I covered it on TikTok a little bit, but I think it's huge. I think it's actually huge. We've covered it deeply in this week's newsletter. I've pretty much written the whole newsletter about this exact thing, and well, I can't say anything more than what it says right on the screen there. The UK looking to be the crypto hub, or the world's financial crypto hub. Like, I can't wait to see what Rishi Sunak's going to do. I don't know what the next hub exactly is, but there's some interesting stuff with him, like pushing back the financial reports coming from the UK to the same time as Ripple's swell event. But let's not get too speculative just to start off with, and let's get into this week's episode.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's massive news in my opinion. I know we say that about a lot of things, but like, when do you ever see a prime minister or whoever leads that specific country come out and say they're trying to make their country a global hub? Obviously, we've had other smaller countries maybe mention it, but this is the UK's prime minister, for God's sake. Like, it's not just like, we're not a smaller country; it's one of the biggest economies in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy's running the country, and he's coming out and he's said in the past all this year that he wants to make UK a crypto hub. And in fact, we spoke about this, I think, on one of the weekly roundup a few weeks ago. I think it was. I can't remember which one. And we spoke about it in the newsletter as well, I'm pretty sure. And he's obviously speaking about the implementation of a CBDC. Now, whether your opinion on CBDCs is bad or good, the fact that he's actually taken a different approach to, like, let's say Biden, for example. Obviously, he's not anti-crypto, but you don't see Biden coming out and, making statements that Rishi Sunak's made in the past about, implementing the blockchain directly into the economy, maybe trialing a CBDC out this year or next year, whenever they can do it as soon as possible, kind of thing. You don't get that. So that's why I'm bullish on this in particular, because he's one of the biggest countries, prime ministers to come out and say that he's going to be proactive with adopting crypto, which is massive.
Yeah, and I think that, I remember we were actually away for a weekend away, me, you, and one of our other IRLs, when I first showed you that video of Rishi Sunak talking about CBDCs and the G7. That was
I remember it.
Was like, I can't remember exactly the date. Maybe it was March or maybe it was September of last year, like one of the two.
Yeah, I feel like it was like April, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
April's like ringing the bell.
April.
March or April, one of them.
I don't know, it just felt like it was such big news then. It kind of went under the radar a little bit, but now, obviously he's come into power as the Prime Minister, it's getting a lot more attention. And also, which we're going to talk about right now, actually, if you want us to go on to the next tab, I think, is it the next tab? It's not coming up on my screen.
Is that what you're on about?
Don't know, my screen's not loaded, so...
Is it about the UK lawmakers?
Yeah.
Yes, I've got a tweet. I'll just quickly say it if it's not loaded up on your screen anyway, but...
Okay.
UK lawmakers have voted today in favour of recognising crypto as a regulated financial instrument. So this came. When did this come straight after Rishi Sunak was appointed? Literally a day after, wasn't it? Or
yeah, so he was appointed on the Monday, and this came on the Tuesday, which I think is just some insane news. How is that getting amended in the bill? The bill was already going to address stable coins, but now all of a sudden crypto's been put in there as a financial recognised asset. Just think it's coincidental, to say the least, like you were saying. And also, as of yesterday or today, Australian legislation has come out. It was to do with their budget, but also in there it recognised crypto as a as a legal asset as well. So it's like, even though it wasn't particularly bullish, the way that it's obviously being taxed like a normal asset, it's still automatic like recognition. So it means that institutions can hold crypto on their balance sheets if they want to in Australia.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm pretty sure. Did you report it last? I think it was last week. We actually reported on it. That literally what you just said about Australia, that applied to the US or something. I can't remember who it was. I'm not gonna be able to remember. Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but like I'm pretty sure it was like a big company saying that. I don't know if they were pushing for that to happen in the US, so more institutions could hold it on the balance sheet. I just remember talking about it, and I'm pretty sure it was.
It was Michael Saylor. It was Michael Saylor who was.
Was it him?
Who was
It was
talking
Michael
about it,
Saylor, yeah. He was like pushing for it, and then I think there's maybe a couple of other people as well, but that's huge that they've done that in Australia. But at least they've put it in the same class as like your normal rules that we have in our current financial system, and it's not just kind of like done what they normally do and put crypto to a side in its own little bracket. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel like crypto's been kept in the corner for a little while now, but now with more like forward-looking like leaders like Rishi Sunak, we might see it come to the forefront a little bit more, especially as like he's been in the office, as we said, for 3 days now. The second day, whether it's coincidence or not, crypto legislation gets pushed to the forefront in the House of Commons. And then I also saw an article saying that he'd already spoke with the head of Solana since he's been in office. It's like whatever they're speaking about, obviously no one knows, but it's just interesting that he's been there for so long. Like Gilbert Verdian used to work with him at the Treasury. I'm pretty sure he's the CEO of Quant. Obviously, like we're going to talk about some of the stuff like later on in this podcast, so I don't want to get into it yet, but there's so many like connections. And one thing actually we're not talking about is obviously his heritage, from like in an Indian background, and we saw the Indian Prime Minister come straight out and basically say, is it the Prime Minister or President, I'm not sure what the correct title is, but basically come straight out and say that they want to work more closely with the UK. And then off the back of that, today I've actually seen Xi Jinping from China. He said that he wants to strengthen his relationship with the UK, and also saw a tweet saying that he wants to strengthen his relationship with the US because he doesn't want controversy. So like, how weird is that all these, two major powers of the BRICS nations, we already talked about South Africa as well in last week's newsletter, but two other major BRICS powers all of a sudden now want to be like pally, and it's like, does that come from Rishi Sunak and his heritage? Does it come from Rishi Sunak's views about finance, obviously, or about crypto? Like, who knows? Like, they're both, China and India are ahead of everyone else in my opinion in terms of crypto. So China with the CBDC and India with at least legislation, even if it's not great legislation. So I don't know, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I don't think, especially like this, the UK lawmakers voting to obviously recognise crypto as a financial instrument. I don't think that's a coincidence. Like you said, he spoke to the founder of Solana, and he's only been in power for this week, matter of days. The thing is, and the reason why I don't think it's a coincidence, and you can even relate it to the relationships with India and China, is that whatever he's got planned, he needs to move fast. Do you know what I mean? With what's going on, like, he's clever enough to, anyone is clever enough now, I think, to know what's going on in not just the UK economy, but like the global economy isn't right. Like it's not really working right now. So whatever they're going to do, they need to implement it fast. He needs to be working, and I'm sure he is. And when things like this come out, it just kind of reiterates that fact that he's moving fast because he needs to get stuff sorted sooner rather than later. Because if you leave it too late, then sometimes some certain parts of the economy, once they break, it's irreversible almost. So, and he knows that. All these world leaders know that. So that's why I personally don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
And don't be shocked if we come back next week's episode and we kind of are sitting here with another big story about Rishi Sunak doing something crypto friendly or maybe improving relationships, because the UK hasn't had the best relationship with China or India really. It's not been bad, but they've not been great because obviously the UK is strongly tied with the US, and there's always been that divide between the BRICS nation and like the Western world kind of thing. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if like those relationships really do come together with the appointment of Rishi Sunak as well.
Well, what I find that's super interesting, whether the timeline's like a bit tinfoil hatty or not, but like we come out of the EU, like Brexit, and now we've got to where we are, and we have like almost the free will to create trade partnerships with whoever we want to right now. And like now we've got someone who can create strong trade like strong trade partnerships with India, and obviously looks like China want to as well. At the same sort of time that central bank digital currencies are potentially coming out with testing with like South Africa that we talked about again, and it's just like it's a strange time. So I've got one conspiracy question for you just before we go into the next part. Is do you think it's a coincidence that Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak have delayed our quarterly reports of like the financial reports until the 17th of November, which is Ripple's swell event 16th and 17th of November, after all this stuff that's going on with Ripple?
See, that is a very good conspiracy theory right there. It could be. Who knows? Are you suggesting that they're going to make some big announcement with like Rishi Sunak kind of related to the UK's CBDC?
I don't know. Like
that's when that gets on another level of conspiracy.
How far-fetched is it now that Rishi Sunak comes out as swell and talks about a CBDC?
Oh, no. I wouldn't say that's far-fetched at all. It's something you wrote in the newsletter, actually, that kind of like stood out because I was editing it today. And it was like, as days go on, you feel less stupid, if that makes sense, in terms of what you've been saying about this whole time, with not just Ripple and XRP, with like the whole crypto and where it's going. And like, I couldn't agree with that more, because certain things are just starting to line up a lot more now. Obviously, it started off as like a bit of a pun, then it turned to a bit more of like an educated guess kind of thing, like we've been speaking about. And now you're kind of seeing other things materialize behind the scenes, and it's really like thinking, damn, maybe I wasn't being stupid all these weeks that I've been saying this. All these people who have been saying that it's a massive long shot. Yes, it's a long shot, but like when you kind of compare it to that question you just asked, is it a coincidence that he's done that? Then it just kind of gets like a lot of things going in your head. And yes, some people might think, okay, you're just being ridiculous. It's just like, that's just one massive conspiracy. But is it, when you got these banks mentioning XRP and Ripple specifically, is this actually that far-fetched anymore? I'd say no.
Yeah, it's kind of like in a football analogy, when you get to take a free kick and then you get to move it like 10 yards forward because someone does something in the wall or whatever. Yeah. And then every single time like something like this happens, you get to move the ball 10 yards forwards, and then it's like you get closer and closer to the goal, whereas like before, obviously a long way to the target, but now all of a sudden you're on the edge of the area thinking like, oh man, I could probably whip this into the top bins from here.
Maybe not me, but
oh me.
No, I get you there. It's a good analogy. It's a good analogy there. I do get it. I do agree with it for sure. But it's a big story. It's a big appointment. Rishi Sunak, hopefully, touch wood, it all goes well and he does a better job than Liz Truss, which isn't really hard, but I guess that's another topic for another discussion another day.
Peak on old,
it's a bit peak. It is a bit peak because she did get thrown into the deep end, but she didn't really deal with it. Yeah. Nah. It's a bit one of them. But we'll move on swiftly from that anyway. And this came in today. Bank of Canada hikes 50 basis points, less than expected 75 basis points. So kind of follows this narrative. Actually, who tweeted about it? I should have came a lot more prepared, guys. I'm sorry. But there was someone who is in somewhat of power in America and to do with the Fed. Were making comments, and this Twitter account that we follow were tweeting updates on the speech, what they were saying, and they kind of followed what this kind of illustrates right here, and the fact that the Fed aren't likely to just completely pivot at once. They're obviously going to slow down their rate hikes, opposed to like completely just switching it like that kind of thing. Those are the comments that kind of were in the tweets anyway, and then this kind of comes out today, and it kind of echoes literally what they were saying in their speech. So, and I'm guessing this is going to be obviously the way that America and the Fed deal with it as well. So obviously a lot of people in the next, I don't know when's the next FOMC meeting. I think I'm pretty sure it's like, yeah, it's very soon. Who knows? Will they come out and, potentially, I know I watched the YouTube video today and they were going over the probabilities of X amount of basis points and the lesser options, as in like the 50 basis points, probability has actually increased. So although it's not, it's not set in stone that they're going to be pivoting or pausing or slowing down in this FOMC meeting, I think this is a bit of a taste of what's to come around the world, not just Canada. I'm talking about every economy kind of thing.
I'd say I agree, and like I said in the newsletter, like I feel like I'm giving a lot away from the newsletter this week, but like one of the things I think Rishi Sunak will introduce in the UK is a CBDC, and I think that we will have to pause and reverse on policy at some point, like whether he thinks that inflation has topped, and whether people believe that inflation was like influenced by massively by supply chains or the printing of money or whatever you might think it was. Obviously, the printing of money has some effect, but I don't think it brings it up 10%. I think that supply chain issues and demand and like people having a demand for goods with increased capital with less supply is something that really like multiplies that inflation. And I do think we've topped on inflation. Like I tweeted out a few weeks ago saying, am I mad to think that we've topped on inflation, etc. I do think that Rishi Sunak potentially will not yet. Maybe we've got another big rate hike to come. Not sure. The same. And the reason I'm using Rishi Sunak as an example is because America obviously follow this. But I think that my speculation in the newsletter was during Rishi Sunak's tenure, I think he'll bring out a CBDC, and I also think we'll probably go into negative interest rates for the first time in history, and probably one of the first nations in history to do that at some point. Like, I know that's a big call, and it's going to take a long time to play out, but I think that's otherwise there's not really that much need for a CBDC, at least initially. Like, it gives you the opportunity to put an extra trick on the central banks, like in the central bank's armory, essentially. Like, we discovered quantitative easing and stimulus checks throughout COVID. So now what's the next thing that we can discover? Maybe negative interest rates to get the economy moving again. Whether we need to use that for a little while, I don't think so. What I think will happen is we'll probably pause policy or slow down with policy and maybe reverse, and that'll incentivize spending. We'll probably then fluctuate back up again, rate hike again, but then at some point things are going to break and you'll probably have to reverse back the other way, like flip-flopping all the time. So maybe we've got like one or two more cycles of inflation and then high rates before we see something like that.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say on that point is don't cut anything out. Like, don't expect the unexpected, because the way and the health of the economy right now is we're in a position where, I know you can kind of relate it to, you know, the 70s or 2008 crash or whatever crash you want to kind of relate it to. We're in a very different position right now. So what worked back then might not have the same effects it does now, because we live in a completely different world. There's different lot of technology, everything's changed right now. So maybe, you know, like you said, I know you're saying like maybe negative interest rates. You've never done it before. Why not? Because the economy's in a completely different state to the 70s or whatever, whatever crash you want to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would say.
Absolutely that. And the reason, like, I know it sounds pretty far-fetched, and exactly what you're talking about there is that we're in a different state. And the different state now is just, like, exaggerated by the amount of debt that we have as different nations. Like, we've never held in the world like this amount of debt, and inflation's good for debt because it means that the value of the debt is worth less in terms of purchasing power. So if you don't have like high inflation, the debt's worth more. You have high inflation, then let the inflation run riot and almost let the debt go to, well, be worth way less.
Exactly.
And that's essentially what's kind of happening in Japan. They're letting the currency run riot. The Japanese bonds are running riot off the back of that, and they'll probably write the debt off at some point. Like, I'm not saying that's around the corner for the rest of the world, but who knows? And negative interest rates basically will let inflation run wherever it needs to run.
Yeah. Well, guess we will see what happens with that. We'll move on to the next story. One that's only broke recently, as in this morning, as you can see here. And because it's a very small, minor story, because it's obviously FTX very likely to launch a stablecoin. SBF confirms. Obviously, that's Sam. What's his name again? Sam Bankman-Fried, whatever his name. There he is, Bankman-Fried. There he is. Obviously, we've spoken about him in other episodes now, and like, back when he was bailing everyone out, and like crypto loved him, kind of thing. I'm pretty sure if you go back to the episode that cause just like I mentioned to Will just before we started recording, I'm pretty sure one of us said, I'm pretty sure it was you that said it as well. Maybe he's, you know, trying to be this crypto darling as such, scooping everything up at these low prices. But what are his actual like motives? Like, what is he actually trying to do? Because we've had obviously like BitBoy had a bit of a, is it BitBoy? Was it BitBoy?
Yeah, it was BitBoy, yeah.
He had a bit of an outlash, and he kind of mentioned some SBS name in that conversation as well. And it kind of does beg that question. Like, obviously he's trying to do this, he's trying to do that, he's trying to like buy everything out whilst we're in the bear market. Is he trying to control crypto? Like, what are his motives? What do you think? What do you think is going on with that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Obviously, like we talked about, I think we both like agreed with the same sort of statement. It's like well, we moved to crypto to be more decentralized. If a central party is, I know that you have to be centralized in terms of exchanges, or at least at the minute, because that's how on and off ramps are working. If a central
Yeah.
party has a majority stakeholder in anything, then it, even if it's not necessarily likely or wasn't at the time that it might be bad, like the options there that they can become power crazy or introduce bad policy that we don't like or whatever. The options are obviously much increased to the side of like negativity, whereas obviously people come into the crypto world for decentralization, and with someone owning a lot of it, the centralization aspect comes back in heavily.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's just human nature to get as much like power as you can. So will we ever live in a decentralized, like whether it be financial or law, will we ever live in a decentralized like world? I don't know, because I feel like humans are just power hungry. So someone will always have to have that power and the control, basically. Which I don't know. So it's a bit of a grey area for me personally, but I know a lot of other people got different opinions on it. But
Yeah, and I
we'll
understand,
see.
like, a lot of people, like, I get a lot of hate in my comments for even talking about CBDCs. It doesn't mean my opinion on them is that I want them to come in. I just think it's inevitable, just like I have been with everything, like what I've talked about with everything in crypto in
Yeah,
general.
100%.
I'm not here to say morally whether it's right or wrong. I actually think that, and I do think we should make an episode on this specifically, is just going to CBDCs. But morally, whether it's right or wrong, the actual technology I think is right. It's just the people who control the technology that could potentially be wrong. So that's what people need to understand as well. But that's again a story from another time. Going back to Sam Bankman-Fried, with his stablecoin, it's interesting that we see Circle be like kind of delisted from, not delisted, but put into a basket on both Binance and with ZeroX that we covered in other weeks. And then we saw, by the way, Coinbase and Circle aren't affiliated, just in case you think they might be, with the C's at the start of the name and the kind of the logos are the same. But he also tweeted that there's a potential acquisition for FTX, and Sam Bankman-Fried was Coinbase. So let's see what happens there as well. So it's another potential company that he might be putting his fingers in that pie.
Yeah, God knows what he's up to. But someone who's up to a lot of stuff, obviously, everyone knows about this story right now. We spoke about it multiple weeks, a long time ago. Obviously, there's been a lot of like to and fro in, a lot of legal battles and whatever. It kind of went a bit messy at some point. But he's bought Twitter. He's pretty much there. He took a sink into the office to the headquarters yesterday, or today it was. And he's obviously here to address the staff tomorrow on Friday. So it's pretty much official now that he's got Twitter under his reins. And we're just going to relate it to the next tab here as well, because I first heard this in a Real Vision podcast, I think it was on Monday. Twitter are reportedly developing its own wallet with support of crypto deposits and withdrawals. This is the source here. This isn't like proper news, by the way. It's just like reports that this might be happening. It's not a bad like shout, to be fair. But then obviously you've seen Doge run up, God knows how much percent. I think it was like 30% since like a few days ago or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to use Doge as a tipping system? Regardless, it's kind of similar to like the Rishi Sunak kind of story. Having Elon control Twitter, which is one of the biggest social media platforms, isn't a bad thing for crypto specifically, I'd say, because he's all about this new technology. He's all about adopting new technology and trying to change the world for the better. So, like I said, it's more bullish than bearish, I'd say. But I know a lot of people don't like Elon. Some people don't like him and maybe question his morals, whatever he's going to do with Twitter. But for crypto, in my books, this is pretty bullish.
Yeah, and like we wrote about this in the newsletter 2 weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure we talked about this on the weekly roundup maybe last week, if not the week before. We tipped Doge, and Doge is like 20% up since we talked about it. What he does with Twitter, I'm not sure. He wants to make like an X app, in inverted commas, so I don't know what an X app is. But my speculation has always been that he's going to try and compete with WeChat and Alipay in China. But who knows? That's again just a personal speculation of mine. And maybe he'll come through with like an extension to Twitter. If you can put payments on Twitter, it's going to be probably one of the most valuable networks in the world. Like it, I can't say like how. Like, I can't underestimate how much of a power network Twitter would be if you could successfully and easily pay each other.
But Elon's not, obviously this is going to sound so stupid, but Elon's not stupid. He knows exactly what he's doing. And for you to say that, it's like, you can't see even in my head, like, he's got a vision where he wants to take Twitter, and like maybe implementing like a payment system into it would, like you said, make it one of the most valuable networks on planet Earth, kind of thing. So let's see what he is. Obviously, he was tweeting. He replied to Brad Garlinghouse's tweet, so maybe it can something to do with XRP. Who knows?
Oh,
Didn't hear it from me. You didn't hear it from me. You didn't hear it from me.
Don't do it.
You didn't hear it from me. But talking about Brad, obviously the weekly roundup last week, we didn't get to report on it because it came out, I think, a few hours after we kind of recorded our podcast, which is on Thursday. We normally record it. But they got the emails. They finally got the emails. Now, obviously, we don't have access to these emails. I think Jeremy Hogan was suggesting that we're not going to see these emails till December, I think he said, at the latest, or something like that. Or earliest opportunity. But then, like you said, I can't remember if you wrote it in the newsletter or you just told me, but because I didn't think about it like this, the fact that they haven't shown these emails to the public is actually bullish for Ripple, because they can kind of almost use it as a leverage against the SEC, because the SEC have spent how long now we've been waiting for these emails. They don't want us to see it. They don't want these emails to expose something that they've been trying to hide for God knows how long now. So
yeah,
it's massive. And obviously here, Brad Gardenhouse is very emotional about it, just kind of like hinting what potentially be in the emails as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see what's actually, like, obviously Stuart Alderati there is saying 18 months, 6 court orders. I'm pretty sure that they were asked, like, 3 to 6 times to even turn the emails over. It's just crazy. But yeah, will we ever get to see those emails is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. And I've been thinking, I personally don't believe we will ever get to see them. But I don't know what the SEC's game is here. Like, there's another angle that you can try and spin this, which is that the SEC could almost kind of claim that everything they've been doing is by the book. Maybe they were just wrong on this case, so they will turn the emails over and they will let everyone see everything. They will take the loss because they're just trying to say that, like, oh yeah, we didn't realize the case was the way it was, and like we just took a case because we thought that this was the way it should be and we were wrong or whatever. So maybe we will get to see them, but in that way then we will get to see if there is any potential corruption within the SEC. Like, that is something that I think isn't, again, like, not far-fetched to talk about anymore, whereas maybe months ago it was a bit like, oh, you probably shouldn't really say that, but now I think that, well, we're going to find the answers out soon, so it's not unrealistic to speculate on right now.
No, 100%. I mean, the fact that Brad Gardenhouse, obviously he's obviously a part of this lawsuit, the fact that he's come out and tweeted this publicly, it kind of tells me a lot, like, in terms of what's actually in those emails and what the SEC have been up to, because surely he wouldn't come out with that much emotion and come out on Twitter about it, if that makes sense, and say what he said. But it does make you think, but will we ever see it again? As more time goes on, the answer just turns to no, really, because it kind of makes you think they'll do anything to kind of get their way out of it. But then, who knows, I'm sure the SEC will try and slam the way out of it somehow, but we shall see. I personally do want to read them, just for the crack of reading them, because I want to see what they've been hiding for 18 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so do I.
Got to be something interesting in there.
So do I.
But other from that, in terms of the SEC Ripple case, we've got these amicus briefs. SEC takes no position on the motions to file amicus briefs by Choice Advocates Network and Spend the Bits. I'm not too sure personally who they are, but I'm sure they'll be filed as well.
I know that Spend the Bits are like basically a way to spend Bitcoin on the XRP ledger, but I don't know who Choice Advocates are, essentially. So
yeah,
but yeah, it's just two more amicus briefs, and I think it got quote retweeted by Jeremy Hogan, basically saying, "Oh look, more amicus briefs on the side of Ripple. Do the SEC have any friends?"
They don't. They actually don't.
They don't.
It's more pressure on the SEC as well.
Yeah, two more companies that come through.
Yeah, there'll be more. There'll be way more as well. Guarantee it. Like, in a few weeks' time, I'm sure we'll get another tweet from James Villan saying that a couple more companies are coming through doing the exact same thing, because obviously it's in their best interest to do that and get this sorted as soon as possible as well. So time's ticking. Time is ticking for the SEC. Time is ticking.
It's looking good, Bev.
It is good. It's looking a lot better. Things take the markets away from the situation. If you look at the court case from a legal standpoint, it's looking a lot better for. Not that it was looking bad for Ripple, but finally it looks like we're getting to the end. I know I could be really premature on touch wood when I say that as well, because we obviously could be sitting here mid next year and we could get into the last stages of the court case then. But I don't know. I think we could see something soon. sooner rather than later.
I
Quite
think
significant with the case as well.
I think we saw like a few comments from like John Deaton recently saying, or at least in the past saying that if we ever saw the Hinman emails, it would start a 90-day clock for the SEC settlement because he doesn't think that they'll ever see the light of day. So he thinks it would settle within 90 days of receiving the SEC, receiving the Hinman emails from the SEC.
That's Ripple receiving it, yeah.
Yeah. So let's see.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad shout at all. I mean, these guys are the professionals in legal, so they know how it works. They know like how much pressure it's going to put on them as well. And because I'm sure there's got to be loads of procedures that go forward for if they are in the starting stages of getting a settlement sorted. There's got to be a lot of like that goes into it. It's not just going to happen within a week, is it? So,
yeah, absolutely.
We shall see what happens with that. And then charts. We've had a bit of price action this week. Actually, it's not been sideways. Bitcoin's actually made a bit of a move to the upside. Ran into a bit of resistance here with 100 MA. Let me just measure how much it's moved over the past couple of days. 7%, which is a lot for Bitcoin nowadays. I never thought I'd say that a 7% move is a lot for Bitcoin. But when you compare it to all these like little moves down there, it's been very stagnant. Finally having a push up. We do need to obviously do a lot more for it to make any significance to anything in terms of like breaking structure, breaking trends, etc., getting over retracement levels. But at least it's nice to see a couple of green candles, eh? It's nice to see a bit of couple of green candles.
Yeah, I mean, you can never moan about green candles, but again, like you're saying, there's nothing to really shout about. But it just shows you, at least in crypto, that like even a 7% move in Bitcoin shows you how stagnant Bitcoin's been. It kind of takes away from the price action that there's been for the last 40 days or something. I think it was. So 40 days of sideways price action can be almost erased by 2 days of green price action. When it's only 7%, it's like, oh, that shows you how sideways Bitcoin's basically been recently.
It's been boring. It's been boring to say the least, but things look like they're picking up a bit. Indicators are looking nice. When I'm looking at the charts now, I'm kind of actually feeling a bit positive about them. Whether that's just a short-term kind of reaction that we're going to see, or if it's actually the start of a long-term trend. Again, no one can really sit there and say that right now with their chest. So, and if you do, then fair enough. At least you're putting yourself out there. But then there's still a bit there for me right now.
Yeah, definitely. We could be seeing a retracement rally before a drop. It's definitely possible, but let's just see how the next few weeks play out. Like, anything's possible still at this point. And we talked about this again in the newsletter, and I gave my opinion, I think it was last week actually, about how I think you should play the markets right now. But I'm not really going to go into that because I think that's quite important for the newsletter holders.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Even I've kind of jumped into it today as well, speaking about it as well, because like last week I touched on-chain data, this week I touched on it again, and I just kind of weighed up both sides of it as well, because I've just kind of given arguments. There is arguments for both sides, like there's no denying that. Yeah. Whether you look at technical analysis, you look at on-chain data, you look at news, you look at the like macro kind of perspective, there's always both sides to it. It's just trying to, position yourself, like we say every week. I feel like a parrot, but I'm just repeating myself. But like we say every week, you just got to position yourself so you're ready for those green candles, and whether they come next week, next month, next year, at least you'll have your investment that you can afford at this time, and it's ready. Or it could just sit there. That's the best thing. Even like one of my friends approached me a couple of days ago, and it's an absolute true story. I've mentioned crypto to him in conversation, like when I first got involved into XRP. When I first got into XRP, I told them to get involved in it, and I think like this week he's made his account and he's pulled the trigger on it as well, because that's the exact same advice I gave him, and I'll give it to absolutely anyone, whether you're like my family or you're just a friend or whoever you are. I'll give you the exact same advice, and that's it right there, to be fair.
Yeah, just fucking buy some and hold it if you.
Yeah, but it's not financial advice.
It's not financial advice, but if you're in a position where you don't have any dependents, then what risk are you really taking when cash is getting inflated away anyway? So.
Exactly. That's the main argument right now, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to take a chance on something, because you can't sit in cash forever. And if you're going to take a chance on something, you may as well take a chance on something with the biggest risk reward like out of any asset class, because property's not safe, stock markets aren't safe, nothing's safe. So if you can get a 5x from a stock, if you're lucky, like if you play a relatively safe stock, if you can get like, I know, a 2x, and this is maybe like over 5 years on a house, or 10 years, or you can get like a 50 to 100x on a crypto, then what are you going to pick?
And that's one of the main things I said to him, and it's one thing I kept saying in our conversation, and I kept mentioning it, and you mentioned it right there, is risk to reward. That's to me kind of solidifies why we are in crypto right now, opposed to investing, because we know about property, we know about all the other things we're investing. Like, we're intelligent enough to we've got access to that, but we've chosen crypto because of that very thing right there, risk to reward, and that's it for me. That's literally why I'd shout crypto to everyone, even if you hate it because of this and that, you can't argue with numbers, which is a risk to reward. So
exactly. And do you want to just touch on the DXY before we sign off this week? What do you think to the DXY?
DXY. I've been looking at this chart a lot. I was going to speak about it in this week's newsletter, but I think I wanted to play out a bit more before I make any calls on it, I think, this time. Because I don't want to get ahead of myself, because not that I'm going to try and blow my own trumpet or anything. Around here, I think we tweeted it, and I don't know if I wrote it in the newsletter, but I was thinking, look, could this time be different in terms of when it was working its way down to its MA there, which I said it was going to do. Obviously, it was quite obvious that it was going to happen with the indicators and everything like that. It's falling through it. We have seen it fall through it before there, as you can see in August. I think we just need to see it out. But I feel like this time, the way that the charts are looking, and with, not that anyone's pivoting yet, or the fact that people are even discussing slowing down, could this be the end of this absolute monster train that the DXY has been on? I'm still gonna stick with my gut feeling and say I think it actually is. Whether we go back up to double tap that high is another question, but I think we could start to see the end of this train that the DXY has been on. Just look at it; it's gone up in an absolutely straight line. Basically, it's not come down and tested like the 200 MA or anything like that. I think it's time for it to kind of cool off, at least short term.
On the weekly and the monthly time frames, the DXY has bearish divergence, with the RSI. Like, the RSI has been forming lower highs on the weekly there, and the same on the monthly, and the price action has formed higher highs. So it's another double indicators on the larger time frames that we could be seeing.
Yep.
That we could be seeing a top, and the monthly one's even more all the way back there. Look to the left, and from where we are now, there's we're forming a lower high with a much higher high price range from whenever that is, 2016, is it? 2015.
Yeah, that was 2017.
Bit further left, as well. It looks a higher high there on the RSI and a much lower high. So let's see.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see, on a much wider time frame there.
Like I said, I think with this, we should let it play out for another couple of weeks now. We'll have a lot more of a clearer picture of it. But even when we reached these highs that we're at now, I was thinking, I can't remember if I did tweet it or not. So I don't know if the proof's out there.
We might have talked about it last week actually on the DXY. Or the week before.
Especially when it failed to make its higher here, or at least test it. I was thinking, I think that it's run out of steam. So. But we need a bit more for it to completely start rolling over and start retracing back to the 100 mark kind of thing. We need a bit more in terms of macro, and maybe a bit of good news that comes out the Fed, maybe less of a hawkish stance, maybe a slight slowdown in policy. I think we need a bit more of a catalyst to really make the DXY dip personally. But
yeah, I agree.
Nonetheless, I don't think it's going to carry. Well, hopefully not. It's not going to carry on this absolute bull train. Otherwise, the whole world's kind of messed up.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
And double, hopefully not, because every single time it starts to retrace, crypto's ran in the past, or since crypto's been about. So
yeah, exactly. So that's not really good for our investments. But like we said, we'll have to report on it as it unfolds now. But that's our opinion on it anyway.
And I think that's probably it for this week. Do you?
That's a rapidly wrap for me.
And so that's
week 29 done. Week 30 next week. Week 30 next week.
Week 30. Wow.
But yeah, we'll see you guys next week.